So today's session, we're back on maths and we are going through formula and volume. So what is a formula? So we're going to start off on formula and then that will lead us nicely into volume, as you kind of need to know a little bit about formulas to be able to use them in any of the volume kind of questions that might come up in your exams. So the formula is basically a mathematical rule expressed in numbers, letters, and symbols. So a lot of people get they get a bit nervous, they get a bit confused when they start seeing numbers and letters and symbols all together. They look at it and they think they don't know what they're doing. But as long as you break it down, it can be really, really simple. It's just knowing the basic rules, which is I'm going to teach you that today. So the letters or symbols basically just represent quantities, which can vary, and they're known as variables. So that is why they don't use numbers, because the letters or the symbols can go up and down. So for example, when you're working out, I don't know, how long it's going to take you to get somewhere, you're going to use your speed and your miles per hour. There'll always be formulas to do that. So this is an example of how a formula could be written. So your volume equals your length times your width times your height. Could also be written as in VLWH. So they don't always necessarily use the full words. Sometimes they will use letters. It comes up in an exam. You don't need to panic. You don't need to worry, because they always have to give you the information that you need. So whatever becomes before the equal sign is what you need to figure out. You'll never know that, because that's what you need to work out. So in this case, we need to know the volume. To know that volume, we need to find the length, the width, and the height. And they will have to give you all of those three calculations for you to be able to work out what that volume is. Okay? So when you are working with formulas, there's a few rules to remember. First one is where a letter and a number or two letters are together. Mathematicians are really lazy. They try and miss out as much as they can. So they will never put in, well, sometimes they will, but generally that's where formulas come into play. They don't put in the multiplication sign. They expect you to know that. Okay. Also, where there's indices, you multiply the number by itself 2 or 3 times. So we're going to come on to that a little bit more in detail in a minute if you're not sure what indices are. You need to follow the order rule. So has anyone ever heard of an order rule? Any kind of acronyms that come with formulas? Anyone ever heard of anything before? There's a really useful acronym to remember. No? Okay. So hopefully you have heard of it before and it'll bring back a few memories. So bidmus, or some people call it bodmus. Either or, they mean exactly the same thing. So your B is for brackets. So anything in a bracket, you must do first. Ignore everything else. Whatever's inside that bracket, you must do first. Then after that, you're going to have to look at the indices. If there's any indices in there, that's the second part that you need to do. You need to work out what that indice is to change that into a figure to be able to use it in your formula. If there's a divide, you do that next. And if there's a multiply, you do that after. That all then becomes before you then add or subtract. Okay, so as long as when you look at any sort of formula, you remember that word, whether bidmus or bodmus, whatever. So it's either indices or order, but they both mean the same thing. It's just, I think one's more of an English term and one's a bit more American term, but some people kind of relate to either or. But as long as you remember what it means, then that's what you need. Okay, so we're going to do an example. So if I wanted to calculate this formula that's on the screen, it's nice and simple. Haven't been mean, haven't thrown any symbols in there or letters. It's just a simple follow the bodmus or bidmus formula. Okay, So B is for brackets. So there are some brackets in there. So first of all, I ignore the times 4 and minus 5. I just do what's inside that bracket. So I go to my calculator and I put in 7 times 3, tells me it's 21. So my new formula is now 21 times 4 minus 5. There is no indices in this example. I can ignore that. There's no division in this example. However, there is then a multiply sign. So this is what I would do next. Again, I would just ignore the minus 5 for now. So I know my part in the brackets is now 21 times that by 4. That whole formula is now replaced with 84 minus 5. There is no addition in there. So the last one is then I need to subtract the 5 from my 84, giving me an answer of 79. Hopefully that looks pretty simple. And literally, in your exam, I would, if you think there's something you're going to forget, write that word down as soon as you start, bidness or bodness, whatever one you relate to. Write it down straight at the start of your exam on your scrap paper. If it comes up, you know that you must follow that order. Okay, so we're going to look at a different example, something that's a little bit more challenging. Okay, so this one has got brackets in it, it's got a letter in it, and it's also got division in it. So generally, well, you will always see the division like this in a formula. So it doesn't need to be confusing. You don't need to think of it as a fraction. All that simply means is you do that top part, then you divide it by what's underneath. Okay, so like I said earlier, they have to give you what F means, because how could you possibly work that out if you didn't know what that was? So they have to give you the values. So in this instance, C is what we need to work out. So by the end of this calculation, we will know what the temperature in Celsius is. Okay, so C is what we're trying to work out. F is your temperature in Fahrenheit. So at the moment, obviously that's not in the calculation, but however, they have told us F equals 86. So it's pretty obvious that we now need to replace that F with 86. And then we need to follow the rules that we've just learned. So E brackets, we're going to look inside the brackets first. So again, ignore everything else apart from the brackets. Okay, so we now know that F is 86. So in your calculator, you're going to do 86 minus 32 equals 54. Okay, so 54 now replaces the whole of everything that was inside those brackets. There is no indices in this instance. There is a divide. So we now know that that number on top was 54. We divide that by 9. It gives us 6. The last thing, remember, they don't always put that multiply sign in. So we know that the 5 before the bracket means I need to multiply by something. We've got rid of the rest of the formula and we're left with 54. So we now know that we need to divide that by 9 to give us 6. 6 is what's left. And then we do 6 times 5 gives us 30. There is no addition in there. There is no subtraction. So the answer is 30 degrees Celsius. Any questions so far on any of the rules, bidness or bodness? Okay, good. I'll take that silence as a good sign, and that is pretty self-explanatory. It's pretty straightforward. Remember the rules, remember bidness or bodness, and you should be able to do that no problem. So one thing I haven't done with you guys yet, I've put examples together myself. I'm not actually showing you something that could come up in an exam. So this is a really good example of a type of formula question that could come up in your exam. This is actually from a different example that you'll be using. So you'll be using NCFE. This is actually an example that I used to use. So your format and your screen, your exam itself won't necessarily look like this in terms of the software that you'll use, but it's really handy for you guys to see how a question's worked out, what it is they expect you to do, the mark schemes on it, and how to actually work it out. I'm going to just play you this short video, and hopefully that will give you an idea of how to Not only use formulas, but to see what sort of questions that you're going to get.
Here we have a level 2 formula question. So if we just read through, Kamrul works for a taxi company. He uses this formula to work out fares, and this formula says you do £2.40 plus 1.5 times the distance travelled in kilometres. Kamrul needs to work out a fare for a distance of 4.5 miles. He uses the conversion 1 mile equals 1.6 kilometres. Kamrul thinks the fare is £14.57. Is Kamrul correct? Show why you think this, and then at the end we've got a check as well. Now I said something in there that's really important. When I said what this formula was, I said that the fare is equal to £2.40 plus 1.5 times the distance travelled in kilometres. The reason why it's times is because when you have a number like 1.5 next to a letter in a formula like this, it means you times them. Mathematicians are really lazy, so when we get the chance, we take out all the symbols that we can, which means we even took out a times here when there should be one. If it helps, I'll even write down here, this is 1.5 times distance in kilometres. Okay, so the first problem we face when trying to answer this question is that we don't have the distance in kilometres, we only have the distance in miles. However, we are told that 1 mile is 1.6 kilometres. Well, if 1 mile is 1.6 kilometres, 1 mile is 1.6 kilometres. Make sure that's clear that that's miles. 1 mile is 1.6 kilometres, so 2 miles would be twice as much. It would be 1.6 times 2 kilometres. If we had 10 miles, it would be 1.6 times 10 kilometres, 10 times as much. But we don't have 2 miles, we don't have 10 miles, we have 4.5 miles. So all I need to do is, to find 4.5 miles, is to do 1.6 times 4.5. Another way of thinking about it is that each one of these miles, each one of these 4.5 miles has 1.6 kilometers in it. So 1.6, 4.5 times. Let's see what that gives us. Let's get rid of some of this. Give me some space. Okie dokie. Good. So we're doing 1.6 times 4.5, 7.2. I'm going to copy that to my working out box. So reminder, what this is, I've turned 4.5 miles into 7.2 kilometers. Now I have D. Now I have the distance traveled in kilometers. Good. So I can start plugging that into the equation now, into the formula, to work out the fare in pounds. I need to do £2.40 plus 1.5 times, super important that times the distance travelled in kilometres, which I just worked out is 7.2. Now before I press equals, I want to say something quite important, which is that your calculator knows bid mass. This calculator on the screen, it knows that it needs to do 1.5 times 7.2. That's the bit it does first, and whatever answer the calculator gets, it'll then add on 2.4. If your calculator did not know bid mass, or let's say you did it on paper with a different calculator before writing it onto the exam, which I know some people like to do, you have to be really careful, that's all, that you do this bit first, because you always do multiplication before addition, and then add on the £2.40. Okay, anyway, equals 13.2, sorted. The fare that he pays for going 4.5 miles is £13.20. I'm adding on a really important zero there because this doesn't mean 13.2, it means £13.20. And that's really important because for currency, you always need to give it to 2 decimal places. Okay, Kamrul thinks the fare is £14.57. Is Kamrul correct? No, he is not correct because we just worked out that it's £13.20. Alright, that's good. Part B, we need to show a check of our working. So I'm going to set this out really clearly, as I like to when we're doing a check. I'm going to write check, just to make it really clear to the examiner that now I'm answering the second part. Now I'm doing the check. To do a check, I like to do a reverse calculation, where I'm going to take something I've done in the working out, take my answer, do the calculation backwards to try and find one of the other numbers I was using. Okay, so that's a bit confusing, but what I mean, I'm going to take this 7.2, I'm just picking this part of my working out because it looks quite straightforward. I'm going to take that 7.2, and it was a times before, so now I'm going to do a divide. And if I divide it by 4.5, my answer should be 1.6, or vice versa. If I divide by 1.6, my answer should be 4.5. I'm going to divide by 4.5, and fingers crossed, my answer should be 1.6, which it is, which is good because that shows that I did the calculation right first time round. Now you've probably just seen that when I press copy to working box, it's put it in the wrong place because I had my mouse, I was clicked in here. So when I press copy to working out box, that's where it copied it. I just deleted that, moved the cursor down, copy it to the working out box again. Good, job done. So three marks for part one. My best guess is that this is your first mark, finding what 4.5 miles is in kilometers. This is your second mark for finding how much he actually costs, and then your third mark is for correctly saying, no, he's not correct. And we've done a reverse calculation to get the mark for part B for checking our answer. Job done. Good stuff.
Okay, so any questions on that exam question itself? I'll let you just have a think about some questions, and I just want to go over a couple of things about that question. So one was the importance of that check. You won't have that on every single question, but maybe 2 or 3 out of the questions it'll say show a check of your answer, and that is exactly how you need to do it in the exam. Write in check and reverse one of your calculations. So it's literally is just for you to check that you've done it right, and if that doesn't come out right, then it's going to show you that you haven't done it correctly. I mean, I would potentially do that for every question anyway. You don't necessarily have to show that in your working out unless it specifies that it wants it. However, it's you to get into that habit because you will then check to see if you've done it right. And it is very easy to type in the wrong digits or use the calculator incorrect. So on that, the calculator, you may think is a good or bad thing, but that system there obviously has a calculator on the screen on your exam. However, you won't have that. So you will have a calculator given to you. So you in it, but it will be the same in terms of it won't have percentages on it. It won't know bottomless. It literally will just do what you need it to do. It'll just be a very, very simple calculator. The good news is by not having that calculator on the screen, and obviously you can see it went to the copy in the working out box, it made the process a whole lot quicker. Anyone that does that exam actually gets less time, so you're going to get an extra half an hour because you are using a normal handheld calculator and you've actually got to type in the numbers. So that's a difference on the calculator part. And as you'll see from that question, it wasn't just a formula question. Yes, you had to follow a formula. Before you could even do that formula, you had to do a conversion. And that's what a lot of your questions will be about in the exam. They won't just be one on percentages, one on formulas. You will have a question that wants you to do 2 or 3 different things in it at once. So in that obviously that question, you had to work with a formula, so you need to know about that. You have to do a conversion, and you obviously have to check your answer. So there's kind of 3 different aspects there that you needed to know about. In another question, you might have a comparison, so it might say Bob wants to go on holiday with his 2 kids. And it might have one advert says this and where he can go and what the prices are, etc. And there's a percentage off that one. And there might be another advert to go somewhere else and with prices, etc. But there might be a fraction off that price. And then the question will be work out the total, or work out the totals for both, and which is his best offer, which it was going to. Well, they might give you an amount. This is how much he's got to spend. Which offer can he go with? So they will get you to do a couple of 2 or 3 different things in one question. And that's why, again, it's called functional, because it's looking at functional things that you do every day. Okay, so any questions on that exam question itself? Did that make sense? Was it pretty straightforward? Do you think you could have had a go at that exam question yourself? What are our thoughts? Did it look really hard? Did it look really scary? Or after you've just learned about formulas, do you think you could do that? Excellent. Thanks, Chantal. So Anyone else? Everyone else happy with that exam question? Obviously, in the invite that I've sent you, you've got this presentation. So if you want to go back on it and have a look at that question again, and try and work it out yourself before, you know, pause the video, have a go at it, then go for it. I can also send you over more as well. So thank you. Good to hear that it all made sense for you guys. So, so moving on. One part of formulas I didn't cover earlier was indices or the order. So depending if you're using bidness or bodness, indices order basically means the same thing. Okay, it refers basically to the power of. So that number is the power of. Okay, so for example, in this instance, I've used x, and x has a 2 above it. So it means x multiplied by x. Okay, so it's x to the power of doing it twice. An example that you'll see when we come on to volume in a minute is, you may have heard of it before, radius r. So r squared means radius squared. So if this was in the question, your radius, so an example is if your radius was 3 squared, then you would do it 3 times 3, which is 9. Okay. Please, please don't fall into the trap of doing 3 times 2, because you don't times it by 2, you do it to the power of what that number is. The number is 3, so you do it twice. You do 3 times 3. If that was a number, if that was 3 cubed, which was a 3 with a 3 above it, you do it 3 times. Okay, like in this example, if the radius is 5 cubed, so you got 3 above it this time, you do it 3 times. So again, you don't fall into the trap of doing 5 times 3. You do 5 times 5 times 5. So basically, whatever that number is, power of, you do it. If it's a 2 above it, you do it twice. If there's a 3 above it, you do it 3 times. So just whatever the letter or the number is, the little number above it, you should see that letter or number 3 times or 2 times based on that number. You don't times it by 2 or 3. Okay, that's a simple mistake that a lot of people do fall into. But if you can get that in your head, and again, if you think you're going to forget that, write it down as soon as the exam starts. Write on your scrap paper, because anything you write at the start of that exam, as soon as they've said your time starts, that's coming from your memory. So you obviously can't go in with that written information, but if that's coming from your memory, you can write it down straight away. I would probably have with you maybe a list of everything you think you're going to need to know and you might forget. Have a look at it before you go into the exam, put it away. As soon as your examiner says start, write it down. Read it, it comes up. Okay, so that leads us nicely on to, now we know a little bit about formulas, volume. Okay, so volume is basically the amount of space that a 3D shape takes up. Okay, so you can work out the volume by following the formula for that particular shape, and they're all going to have different formulas. So you need to practice and remember what the different formulas are for the different shapes, because 9 times out, sometimes they're nice and they may give you a formula for circle or maybe a triangle if you're very lucky, but definitely your basic shapes they're not going to. But I would just play it safe and make sure you know all of them. Okay, so these are some examples of some pictures of 3D shapes. The example in the middle is as an example of a net shape. So I'm going to be doing 2D and 3D shapes on one of the next sessions. So we'll look into nets on another day. But today is obviously the space in the middle at the moment. So we're going to look at rectangular prisms first. Okay, so this is a rectangular prism. You can see where the length, the height, and the width is in the diagram. So 9 times out of 10, they'll always give you some sort of diagram. They're getting you to work anything out in an exam. There's always a diagram there, because that's where they'll show you the measurements. Obviously, if that was an exam question, the measurements would be where the L, W, and height, L, W, and H is. So it could be written L times W times H, as we learned earlier. It could just be LWH. Okay, so they don't always put in those times. So the volume is length times width times height. Could be written in any of those formats. As long as you remember what to do, that's the main thing. So looking at an example question, so this could be an example exam question saying, can you work out the volume of this shape? Okay, so we know that the volume is LWH. We know from the rules earlier, we must put in a multiply between those letters. So it's going to look like this. So taking the figures from the diagram that we've got, your length is 18, your width is 4, your height is 5, times them together, going to give you 360. Always make sure that you show your measurements and what they're measured in the answer. So it's not just 360, it's 360 meters cubed, because we're talking about volume, so it's always cubed. Okay, we're going to look at a cylinder. So a cylinder is basically, so you've got your flat circle and then it turns into a cylinder, so like maybe a water bottle, for example. So thinking back on where we went through areas, it's very similar to the areas, but you just adding another aspect in, so you've now got the height. So it's still pi r squared, which is the circle formula, but now we've got a height, so we just times the height. So as long as you can remember the formula for a circle, you just times the height on the end to get your volume for a cylinder. Okay, so your r is always your radius, and your h is always your height. And again, hopefully you can remember from when we did areas that you could also have in their diameter, which is the whole way across the circle. So if you do have diameter, you just half it to get your radius. Okay, so r is your radius. Pi, if you've forgotten, is that little symbol. It always equals 3.14. I've seen some exam questions give you the value and tell you it's 3.4, and I've seen some that don't. So it's really best that you remember that. And h is always your height. Okay, so r squared, as we've just learned, it doesn't mean times 2, it means times that number by itself. So whatever r is, you times it, you do it twice. You don't times it by 2. Okay, so you should never see 2 in your calculation unless r is 2. Then it would be 2 times 2. But if it's not 2, 2 should not be in your calculation. Okay, so an example question for a cylinder. So we know that V is a volume, and we know that we need to do pi times r squared times height. So going back to what we learned about formulas, we need to make sure we do this in order. So in the diagram, it's given us the values. They have to obviously give you the values to be able to work it out. So we know that the value from the diagram, r squared, is 5. So we do 5 times 5, it's just 25. So there shouldn't be a 2 in there because we're just replacing r with 5 and we're doing it twice. So it's 5 times 5. Obviously following Budmus, there's no brackets. The indices we've just done because that's the r squared. There's no division. There is multiplication. So that's where we go next. So we use that 3.14, we times it by 25, we times it by 10. 25 is obviously the radius that we've just worked out earlier. 10 is being taken from the diagram because that's our height. Gives us a total of 785. Make sure the answer is written in the measurements it requires. So 785 meters cubed. I appreciate in your exams that having to type in your answers, you are not going to be able to do that little M3 above it. Trust me, it took me ages to figure out how to do it for the presentation. So it's definitely not an option on the keyboard, and it's not an option you'll have to insert. So if it does ask you for that, just write M and write the word cubed or squared, just so they know that you know what you're talking about. Okay, so looking at triangles. So this is an example of a triangle. We know that V is the volume. This time, as we learn in areas, a triangle is basically half of a rectangle, half the square. Okay, so this time you find the base, you half the base, then you times it by the height and the length. Or some people prefer to do the base, the height, and the length, times it all together, and then half it. You're going to get the same answer either way. Whatever works for you, as long as you remember to half it, is the most important thing. Okay, so V is the volume, B is the base, H is the height, and L is the length. So, an example question you could get in your exam. So as always, you've got the diagram, you've got the measurements on there. So generally, they wouldn't be as nice as this in the exam. They wouldn't tell you the height, the base, and the length. They wouldn't put those letters or label them. You would just literally have the measurements in there. Okay, so you would only see the 3 centimeters, the 2 centimeters, and the 4 centimeters. Okay, so we're working out the volume. So V equals half the base times the height times the length. That is our formula. So we can see from the diagram that the base is 2. So we need to divide that by 2 because we need to half it. So that's 1. We then do 1 times 3. 3 is your height times 4. 4 is your length. Gives us 12. The answer is 12 centimeters cubed. Okay. So hopefully that has all made sense. And as always, you know that I like to put in a quiz. And Heather likes to win them. So if anyone's up for challenging Heather so she doesn't win again, although Heather, I'm sure you will. I think you've all been on before, so if you can open your Kahoot app on your phone. Obviously, Chantal, I know you're not going to be able to access it because you won't be able to obviously see the questions. So if you can just listen carefully, I'll send you the recording after so you can actually see the questions, but I will read the questions out and go over the answers as well. So as always, don't worry, it's just for fun, and obviously the bragging rights come with that. And as Heather will know, I do send you a little diagram of you and your question, and you coming out on top. So nice little touch. It shows that you've achieved something. So good luck. Let's get your pin up. Okay, so should be coming on the screen in a minute. Okay, so here's your game pin. You've got 7, 3, 2, 1, 5, 2 is what you need to enter in. And then pop your name or your nickname in. Obviously, I'll see you pop up on the screen once you're done. So wait for you all to get in. Harry's in. Saying you don't get any points for joining first. Chantel's in. She's going to try it out again today. And we got Harry. So we got Harry, Joe, Heather, and Chantal. Excellent. That's everyone. So just a quick reminder, Chantal, because you may not have seen it properly the other day. As soon as I start, give you 5 seconds, and then it's going to kick in. The questions will come up on your screen. I'll read them out. You will then obviously see the answers come up, and you need to press on the correct answer on your phone or whatever device that you're using. Okay, good luck. So 5 questions on volume. What is the formula to work out the volume of a rectangular prism? Okay, well, a few mixed answers there. I was a bit mean and I did put some answers that were quite close. Okay, so obviously blue is the right answer because you've got volume equals length times width times height. So quite easy mistake is that the green one, and so it's got a plus in there, so you could have just missed that. Hopefully that was just you trying to get in quick. And obviously the yellow ones are all pluses as well, they're not times. So remember, you always times it. Let's see who came out on top. She's back on it. Well done, Heather. Next question. What is the formula to work out the volume of a cylinder? Okay, so these are timed, so yeah, one of you didn't get a chance to get your answer in. So yeah, the answer is, so it's volume of a cylinder. So you've got your pi times your r squared times your height is the answer. Two of you went for, oh, that was my little bogey one. So you've got pi. That one obviously has a plus in it, plus the r isn't squared. So slight difference. Obviously, I've written them differently just to not act you out, but just to see if you kind of picked up on it and learnt it. So yeah, just be aware that obviously I know it's obviously a quiz and you're doing it pretty quickly, so you probably just overlooked the plus and the multiply. So it's just a bit of fun. But I'm sure you already know that. Excellent. Next question. Oh, Harry got in there first. Well done, Harry. So pi is what amount? Excellent. So 3 of you got that right. Excellent. So it's what? 3.14. Good. So blue is an easy mistake to make because it's 3.4. Yeah. So you've got all the numbers in there, so it's close. But yeah, if you're doing it at speed, that's an easy mistake. I'll let you off on that one. Let's see who's up there. Harry, he's on fire. Well done, Harry. You might actually beat Heather this time. Okay, next question. In the formula of a cylinder, does R mean range? Mixed questions. If it doesn't mean range, what else does it mean? So yeah, true. It was true, so it's definitely blue. So remember, it's R squared. So excellent. So Harry's on top. Well done, Harry. Does x cubed mean you multiply by 3? Oh, did you fall into my trap? Okay, remember you don't times it by 3, you times it 3 times. So it'd be x times x times x. You don't multiply it by 3. So well done. Let's see what the podiums come out like. Chantal, you managed to play this time. Excellent. And in second place this time. Got a new champion. Well done, Harry. I'll make sure the bragging rights come over to you. Good effort on that one. So, any questions on any part of the session